Okay, here we go. Right, okay. Oh, hello, Dad. Pleasure. In person, no. Okay. Honor to have my father here. Of course. Okay. What? 8 o'clock, yeah, 8 o'clock. So perfect timing. 8 o'clock, as long as you came in from Ireland for 8 o'clock. Okay, so we're up to the Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah now. There's always a challenge with a weekly share is keeping momentum. The aim is to finish the parak before Pesach, which will involve going a little bit faster than normal. Hopefully tonight, because most of the share is actually Agadata. The next stuff is mainly Agadata. I'd like to cover grounds. I think it'll be a nice thing to do to begin the third parak after Pesach. Is everyone all right with that? Yeah, I think it means we will keep the momentum up. So we will go slightly quicker than normal to make sure that we can achieve this. But we have to. This bit isn't Agadata. The next one is. We're up to the Mishnah at the bottom of Choftalet on the base. So the Mishnah says, "Marchikin is going kovua min ho'er 50 amo." So you have to distance. Again, we're talking about damage and potential damage still to a city. You have to distance a goren kovua. Goren kovua is basically a fixed threshing floor. What does it mean fixed? And we'll talk about that. 50 amos away. 50 amo. And the problem is basically the chaff when you do the winnowing process, which involves throwing it up in the air and then one of those pitchforks, right? And it separates out the chaff from the wheat, right? Wheat from the chaff. Yeah, that's right. You want the wheat, not the chaff. And the chaff goes in the wrong direction and blows into the city and injures people. And therefore, you've got to be 50 amos away. So that's the first halach in the Mishnah. Next one. Person cannot make one again a goren kovua, a fixed threshing floor inside one's own property. Unless you have 50 amos in every direction. Again, you've got to make sure that you've got enough space, space around to be able to space around your property to not injure those who are nearby. You also have distance from the things that are planted by someone, your neighbor has planted stuff in his field or whatever, or his Nero is his plowed field. Somehow it can damage a plowed field. So that it doesn't cause damage. So obviously the challenge is basically how to reconcile the first half of the Mishnah with the second part of the Mishnah. Because what are we interested in? Are we interested in a fixed amount of 50 amos? Or are we interested in however much it is to cause damage? Why give a different measurement? Should say 50 amos, be consistent. 50 amos, 50 amos, 50 amos, right? Okay, the more I'll explain. Let's see Rashi on the Mishnah. Goren kovua. Rashi says, Gemora mafarish my kviyusa. The Gemara is going to explain what does it mean it's fixed. 50 amot because of the chaff from mazik es bnei ho'er, which injures those in the people in the city, kashu zora, when he performs the winnowing process. The gama zroim umiyabesh also dries out growing crops and things and seeds. Uminiro shel chavero, from his friend's plowed field. But the Gemara mafarish my hezek demotes lenir. How can chaff damage a plowed field? It's quite difficult to damage a plowed field, but nevertheless, it seems you can. What is near? Rashi says near hi charisha. This is a plowed field shechorshen b'mei hakayetz. Plow it in the summer. Ve'in zorin b'adimos hachoref. It's not sown until the winter season. Kadesh yomusu shroshi hakotzim. What is the purpose of plowing, overturning the earth? It's to kill the roots of thorns, v'asovim, like weeds and things like that. Kedichsev, as you have a pasuk in Yirmiyah that describes this, niru lachem ne'er val tizrael kotzim, which basically says make sure you plow your field and don't sow to make sure you don't sow to create where there are thorns there. Presumably the context there is in a Musa context of making sure that you sow your seeds in a place that's just fertile for growth rather than a place that is not. But you have to look that up. This measurement mashma implies less than 50 hours. What's the difference between this end of the Mishnah and the first part of the Mishnah? The talks about 50 amos in any direction. Right. So the Gemara, okay, everyone all right with that? Yeah. So the Gemara says like this. What is the difference in the first part of the Mishnah and the second part? Why is it the second half talks about so it doesn't cause damage, doesn't talk about 50 up. Amar Abai says Seifason Goren Sheino Kavua. The end of the Mishnah is talking about a threshing floor that is non-fixed, that is not a fixed threshing floor. What does it mean a threshing floor is not fixed? If you don't need a pitchfork to do your winnowing, basically you rely on the natural process of the wind to do it for you. Basically, if you've got a very large pile of grain or whatever it is, not grain, grain, then you have to use an implement to throw it up in the air to separate out the chaff from the wheat, right? And that therefore, if it's a threshing floor that doesn't require that type of implement, that's kind of a temporary threshing floor. Threshing floor is very, very important historically. We have got where Rus, exactly. Rus is the classic, Goren Hasorim Halaylo. He slept next to the threshing floor. Goren Hasorim, the place where they used to do the yes, Goren Arnuna, exactly. Absolutely. There we are. Absolutely, that's right. So the Gronos was a very important part of life in those days. Okay, Ravashi Omar. So that's Rabbi Yisrael. Ravashi says, Matan Omar. So Ravashi says that it's not that they're different. He says differently. He disagrees with Abai, and he says that it's simply explaining. The second of the Mishnah is just explaining the first part, right? What's the reason? My tam amarchikin going amar. What is the reason you have to distance 50 amas? So that it doesn't cause damage. Right? That's the reason why you got a distance 50 amas. But it's all the same thing. Question from a Bryce marchikin. The Bryce says marchikin going kavom and oer chamishim amo. You have to distance the fixed goren from a city 50 amas. Okashem shemarchikim and oer chamishim amo. Just like you have to distance from the city 50 amas, kach marchikin midluov, v'mikishuov, v'mitiosov, v'miniro shechaveiro chamishim amo, kedei shelo yazek. So too, you have to distance from his gourds and cucumbers and whatever else it is. What's it? I think it's leeks. And I think it's cucumbers. Mitiosov things he's planted. Nero is the plowed field. 50 amas kedei shelo yazek doesn't cause damage. So the question is obvious. According to Ravashi, it makes sense because it says clearly. So that it doesn't cause damage, which is 50 amas, right? But according to Abaye, it's a problem because according to Abaye, it seems he said there's two different measurements here, right? Depending whether it's a fixed thing or it's a non-fixed thing, right? Two separate things, yeah. So he says. So he says, Kasha, the Gemora says this is a problem. This is left unresolved. Yeah. You know what we mentioned before, the difference between Kasha and Teiku. Yeah. Teiku means we don't know the answer. You can't resolve it. It's unresolvable. I know he will do it for you. Kasha means a problem, but there is a solution. Just the Gemora is not happy with it for whatever reason. Yeah. Now the Gemora just now has to deal with the final remaining issue, which is what is the damage you can do to a plow field with chaff? Yeah, from things that are growing. So they can basically go inside the heart of the dust and go inside the crops, and they can actually seems to be the Aruch says it means to dry them out, right? So suck out the moisture. What's the problem with the plowed field? What it does is it increases the manure and it basically ruins the crops. If you have the chaff there, it's going to ruin the quality of your plowed field, which you don't want to do. Says, okay, right, that's it. Let's see. Rashi the pile is not very large. You don't have to sow it with you don't have to winnow it with a pitchfork. The wind blows through on the pile of grain, and the chaff just blows off of its own accord. Rachas is a palabalaz, it's a pitchfork. So Kashakri Godo, when the pile is large, so you got to lift up with a pitchfork, v'zorek klapi malo, and he throws it heavenward. The wind blows the chefas amot mirochak, and it pushes it away to a distant place. Rav Ashi Yom Shira the Sefer Karesha, the shir of the end of the mission is the same as the first part. Matal was given the reason that was the difference in Rav Ashi and Abai. This is a if we're talking about a patch of ground or whatever that these crops are growing in. Rav Ashi says about all of them it's 50 amos. So he said according to Rav Ashi, the Brisa makes sense because the Brisa says 50 amos consistently. According to Abai, it's a problem. The Gemora says kasha, that is left as a question on Abai, because according to Abai, there's no reason why there should be. He says there are two different measurements. One is 50, and one is so it doesn't cause damage because it's not a fixed go-in, right? That's why says that was the right text of the Gemara. And finally, top of the Omach, so Golol Marbelo Zevel increases the manure or whatever. Here is something negative. A surface as zroim, and it sort of burns out the crops and Israel that's sown in it. Here, Golol Tosus deals with this problem. The very first Tosus, he says, Apolgav. The golol mashpiach hakarka. Generally speaking, manure is positive, not negative. Kashi kula golol mazik. If you try and sow only in manure, you've got a problem. Basically,
too much.
Yeah,
too much.
I'm not a farmer, but it sounds like you've got to combine it with soil. Too much, yes. Otherwise, you will ruin it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So the next Mishnah. Yeah, Masnisim. Top of Chof Hey Amadalef. Machikenes on Avelos, Lesa Gvaros, Lesa Bursakim in Oer, Chamishim Amo. You got to distance carcasses, Nevelos, right? Kvoros, basic Kvoros, right? A cemetery. There's a Bursaki and a tannery, Min Oer, Chamishim Amo, 50 amos away from the city. I would be very impressed if anyone knows the connection between this and Purim. It's actually not that difficult.
No.
What? Seriously? It's not a Purim joke.
Okay.
What's the connection between that line of the Mishnah and Purim? Come on, you're going to kick yourselves when I tell you. It's actually, I think, the Kerem Hatzvi says this, I think. Happens to be, you see? Amazing, this Mishnah. What's the connection? I'll give you a clue. Something to do with Homon. Yeah, what's 50 amos in Purim? The gallows. Why does Homon hang 50 amos high? I mean, he built it with Mordechai. Yeah, because Machikin is an avail. He says because you have to distance the carcass from a city 50 amos because of the smell.
Even hanging on a rope. Hanging on a rope.
Even vertically, he was hanging. Nobody was 50 amos high from the top. Okay, all right, I see what you mean. All right, that's a bit.
Because a lot of the time the cities will adopt these type of things.
No. I think I don't know whether as far as I remember, I think it's a brief comment from the Kerem Hatzvi who says why did the piece of wood have to be 50 amos high? Because of this Mishnah. Because Nevela has, whether he did that as a sort of comment, as a negative comment about homeless. I think it's. Yeah.
Is it not always like things to be sort of?
Yeah, there are a lot of exactly. There are lots of ideas there. You know, there's a famous Chazal that piece of wood came from the Teva. You know all this. Yeah. That piece of wood, that piece of wood's supposed to come from the Tevas Nerch. That's where he got it from. He had a son who was one of Haman's sons, was a ruler in Turkey or wherever, and got hold of a piece of wood from the Teva.
Reclaimed.
Yeah. Yes.
Very eco-friendly.
Yeah. Reclaimed wood. There's a whole link there. Anyway. Yeah, recycle the piece of wood. Anyway, but they all hung on that piece of wood, right? One under the other.
But a grave is not smell. I think it's smell because you put it underground.
No, it can. Well, it can do, especially in those days. It could have taken, if it takes any sort of time to get to the. Unfortunately, they were sometimes transporting people major distances. In 1066 in this country. Okay, it's very important to know this. Right, for about 100 years after 1066, the only place Jews were allowed to bury their dead in the country was a place called Cripplegate, which is where the Barbican is today. I only know this because it's part of the London tour. I mentioned it on the tour. Yeah, the Chazorah. Cripplegate is where the Barbican is nowadays. And that was the only place, about 100 years, from the time when the Jews entered with William the Conqueror, that was the only place they were allowed to have Beis HaKvaros. Now, you think to yourself, a Jew living in Norwich, I don't know how many Jews were in Norwich, whatever it was, even 50 miles away, is going to get to the Beis HaChaim down in London. Come on, it's never, that's what they had to do. That was the only place they were allowed to bury their dead. I think it was about 100 years. So, Beis HaKvaros, in those days, unfortunately, so that's what it is. And and also we live in a very sanitized world. They didn't, and every aspect of life was like that. There wasn't something which was, it's. You find other examples of this elsewhere as well. Okay. Anyway, that's the first halacha, to make sure the smell doesn't damage the city. And we know tanneries as well were famously very, very smelly places. You're not allowed to make a bursaki, a tannery, to the east of the city. To the east of the city. Now, this is all to do with wind direction. The point is that if you do it too close, the one was explained, but basically the problem is that the westerly wind is well, it could be because the westerly wind will actually carry it away from the city rather than towards the city. But anyway, we'll see in the Gemora. Basically, you're positioning it to the east of the city. Okay. You're thereby avoiding it being brought into the smell being brought into the city. Rabbi Kiva says, "L'chol ruach hu'osa, chutz mi'ma'arava." You can make it in any direction. You can put it in any direction as long as you don't put it the west. It's the opposite. He says, "Don't put it chutz mi'ma'arava," not except for the west. Umarchik 50 amma, and you have to distance it 50 amas. Rabbi Kiva's statement is a bit ambiguous, so we'll see in the Gemara how the Gemara deals with that. Separate halacha. Min hayerek. You have to distance the pool which was used for soaking flax. That was also something which became a bit smelly, I think. Or actually, no, I don't think it was to do with smell. This was something else. This is to do with, we learned this when we did this at the beginning of the parak. This is to do with damage that can be caused from, I think, the flax pods or something like that. We did this, where was it? Oh, it was toxic, right? There's some toxic substance, damages plants. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the same thing. From the vegetable, leeks have to be distanced from onions. They seem to cause some damage to onions if they're too close. And the mustard from the bees. Remember that? The mustard and the bees. Rabbi Yossi says it's okay with mustard. Now, the story of the mustard and the bees was, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but basically the issue with the mustard and the bees was that the bees end up eating the mustard. It's a bit counterintuitive. The bees eat the mustard and thereby don't produce honey, basically. It does something to their mouths or whatever, and therefore end up not producing honey. So it's the mustard that damages the bees, right? But Rabbi Yossi says it's okay. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi says that there's damage both ways. You're telling me that your bees, I'm damaging your bees because they're eating the mustard and then going back and they can't produce honey, but you're damaging my mustard plants, the flowers, they're eating all the flowers up. So therefore that's why he said, and that was the whole discussion in the Gemara at the beginning of the Perek, went into great detail about this, about, kind of whose fault is it? Who are we blaming here? They're both damaging each other, etc. That's not the Gemara doesn't go into this here in any detail at all, just very briefly. Okay, says Rashi, as an available as far as because of the bad odor, el mizrachoyer she'eino ruach mizrachis kosher tomid, because an easterly wind is not always a negative, it's not bad, doesn't cause damage, elam kim ba'al puronus, unless it comes for punishment. There is an idea of it coming for an easterly wind can come. I think we'll talk about this. Can come for a negative issue, but generally speaking, it's okay. Generally speaking, it blows normally. It's all fine, and we find the source for this in Sefer Yonah. The pasuk says in Yonah, "Ruach kodim charishis." There was this easterly wind, and it did something with the sun. It was something pleasant. It wasn't something negative in that way. This was to do at the end of the Sefer Yonah with that tree, the kikoyon. And therefore it can't bring the smell to the city. Yeah. So in other words, according to the Tanakama, if you position your tannery on the east of the city, so the easterly wind is not going to blow it that much in the direction of the city. Okay. The westerly wind, which is a problem, is actually going to assist, according to the Tanakama, right? Because it's going to carry the smell away. The westerly wind will carry it in the wrong direction, right? Which is good. Chutz min ma'arava. Now, the Rabbi Akiva says any direction except for the west. We're going for Shamas. The Gemora will explain how to reconcile Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva is a problem, and the Gemara spells that out straight away. The Gemara, they ask the following shadow. Rabbi Akiva hechri kama. What's Rabbi Akiva saying? L'chol ruach you can make it in any direction with somich. Anyway, any direction right next to the city. Chutz min ma'arava demarchik nun amo v'oisa. Except for the west, where you have to be 50 amos away. That's one way of reading Rabbi Akiva. You look what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Akiva says, put it in any direction except for the west and distance 50 amos. So one way of reading that is put it wherever you like, right next to the city, except in the west where you have to be 50 amos away, because he's got a problem with the westerly wind, let's say, right? Odilma, or another way of reading Rabbi Akiva is you can put it in any direction. Of course, you got to be 50 amos away in any direction. Chutz mi'ma'arava, except for the west, de'eno seklal. You can't make it at all in the west. In other words, those words, marchik chamishim amo, are they going on the first part of Rabbi Akiva's statement or the second part? That's the question. Yeah?
Are we going on the basis of the smell of tannery?
The problem is definitely the smell of the tannery. The question is, what is the concern of Rabbi Akiva?
If it's going that way, no one cares. It's going away from the city.
Well, it's going. It's
westerly wind.
Right. Well, that's the thing. We don't know. We have to establish what the problem is. Is there a problem with the westerly wind or not? It's clear. The Gemara takes on clearly that Rabbi Akiva is strict about the west. That's clear.
Because of the smell?
Yeah, the smell. No, definitely the smell. That's definitely the problem. Yeah, but we're definitely worried about the smell. That's for sure. The question is, the Tanakama says you must always be 50 amos away, and you can only make, that's what it seems to say, the burusiki can only be positioned, tannery, in the east of the city. Rabbi Akiva, we're not sure what he's saying. Is he saying, he's not worried about the east, he's worried about the west. But is he saying you can only make it in the west 50 amos away, right? And everywhere else, you can put it right next to the city. Or is he saying, don't make it in the west at all, and every other direction be 50 amos away, like the Tanakh says? That's the question.
It doesn't make a difference either way. Your 50 amos applies in any direction apart from the east.
Not clear though. It could be he's okay with other directions, even being right next to the city.
You say
yeah, but that's the problem. We don't know what those words mean. Do those words go on every direction apart from the west? Because in the west, you can't even be 50 amos. Can't do it at all. Or are those 50 amos going only on the west? And everywhere else, doesn't care. No rules. Do what you like.
This way.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, any other? Yeah. Yeah.
Going that way, what's the problem?
Who's going what way?
The city centre is the issue.
Well, no city centre. We don't know. It depends on wind direction, wind speed.
Should go up and down, as opposed to west.
What should go up and down?
The way of the wind.
Oh, I don't know. Does it?
What I'm saying to you is, you've got a north and a south.
Yes, that's true, but we don't know which way the wind's going to blow. This is all based on a concern about some prior knowledge, which we need to discover as the wind direction, wind speed, which is what we need to establish. Yeah, exactly. Toras says, let's prove it from here. You can make it in any direction. And you have to be 50 amos away. So that means make sure you're 50 amos away wherever you are. Except for the west, where you can't make it at all. Now we have a reason for the first time. Because it's constant. What does that mean? What does it mean constant? If you're going to say it's because it is the most frequent wind. The wind usually blows, the westerly wind blows more than the other wind, right? And that's why it's a problem more in the other directions. So Rav Chanan Bar Rabba says, there are 4 winds that blow every day, and the northerly wind blows with all of them. there is a northerly wind blowing together with all of them. The northerly wind has a positive effect. Shilmole came, because if not for that, okay, the world would not last even 1 hour, It has some positive effect. The northerly wind has some positive effect on the other winds, right? Right, so there we are. Now, the southerly wind is worse than all the others. So you see that the southerly wind is the problem. The Moli Ben Nates Shema Mido, if not for the fact that the Ben Nates is it's a malach which is shaped like an eagle. I think it's an eagle, yeah. Shema Mido. Then if not for the fact that this malach sort of looked after it, Machreves, or restrained it, Machreves es ha'olam, it would destroy the world. And you see this in the Pasuk in Yev, Shneim Pasuk in Yev says, Hamibinoscha Yavor Nates. Is it from your intelligence that the eagle takes wing? Yifrotz Kanopot, does it spread its wings from the Tamon to the south? This is part of the polemic that Hashem himself launches against Eov. Eov says, I don't understand why you're causing me so much suffering. All his friends try and give him all these ideas, because of this, because of that. And finally Hashem says to him, answers him min hasara, from the whirlwind, saying, you understand Gornished. That's basically what he says. Do you understand anything? Nothing. And he goes to all the things in nature. Do you understand why this happens, why that happens? Do you understand anything? Why? Because it's part of my plan that you don't understand. And one of the things that are listed there is, do you understand how this malach called the Nates somehow restrains the winds to the south? You don't understand it. So therefore, the point we are getting from this is that you see that the southerly wind is the problem. Okay, so it can't be. It's not the westerly wind is the biggest issue. So what does it mean? Elamai tadira. What does it mean that it's constant? It means tadira b'shchina. The shchina, the divine presence, is in the west, and that is why you want to avoid the west, putting this tannery in the west. Let us thank our ancestors. They made known to us the place to daven to. This is the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. They said this pasuk in Sefer Nehemiah. The hosts of the heavens. Who is that? Well, who is the host of the heaven? That refers to the sun, the moon, and everything, right? And they bow down to the west, so to speak. Okay, they bow down to the west. What does it mean they bow down to the west? Because they rise in the east, move towards the south, the southwest, they move towards the west, rise in the east and move towards the west. So you've got to imagine it sort of metaphorically as if they are, by moving to the west, bowing to the west, okay? Which means that Rabbi Shimon Levi says, our ancestors have taught us where the place of the Shechina is in the west, by identifying Tzva Shamayim, L'chom Ishtachvim, they bow down to you. That means the Shechina being in the west, okay, in some way. Now, Maskiv la Ravacha bar Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov asks the question: is Dilma Kavish not to pras mirabo? See, it could be the other way around. That yes, the sun and the moon, they rise in the east and they set in the west, and therefore they're like a servant moving backwards and bowing as it departs. Maybe the Shechina is in the east and they are moving. You understand? The sun is moving in the. You got to think of this sort of conception. The sun moving to the west and bowing to the place of the Shechina in the east, like a servant who bows, stepping backwards. You know what I mean? Like people do at the Kosel, walk backwards and bow like that, right? Yes. To that, therefore, how can you prove which direction the Shechina is from that pasuk? Basically, the kasha. The Gemora says again, kasha. This is not resolved anyway. Okay, but either way, we're not bringing. You're saying it's not a conclusive proof from this pasuk in Nehemiah, or at least Rav Chaim has a question on it. But either way, we're saying that the problem with the West, and the reason why Rabbi Akiva doesn't allow you to put your tannery in the West, is not at all, even 50 amos away. It's nothing to do with the city, because it's 50 amos away. You're not going to bring it. It doesn't seem it's going to be a problem with the wind carrying it. It's because the Shechina is there, and it's not appropriate, therefore, to position it in that place. You've got a choice where you position your tannery near the city. Don't put it in the West. That's Rabbi Akiva said. Now, Rabbi Yosha disputes this idea and this concept of saying the Shekhinah is in the west. He says the Shekhinah is everywhere. Remember the song? Dom Rabbi Yoshia. Because Rabbi Yoshia says, "Ma'idich Siv," what does it mean? It says in the Pasuk, "Atohu Hashem levadecha, Atoh Siso es hashamayim v'gonav." Right? Say this Pasuk goes on. You are Hashem alone. You created. You made the heavens. Shluchech lo ki shluchei b'osav adam. Your agents are not like the agents of b'osav flesh and blood. Shluchei b'osav adam mokum shemishtalchim l'shom machzim shlichuson. It's a beautiful concept. This, if you send someone to do a mission for you, an agent, shliach, so mimokum shemishtalchim l'shom machzim shlichuson. They got to go back and report back to where they left. The place they were sent from. The person they sent them is still in England. They're sent on a mission to Harlem. They got to come back to England to say, well, I've done the job. Your agents are different. The place they're sent to, that's from there, they return their agency from that place. Shnei the Pasuk says, Hasishlach, again, it's part of that same bit of Eov. Hatishlach brokim, do you send lightning bolts vayelchu, and they go vayomer, and they say vayomer lecha, vayomer lecha, and they say to you hinenu, here we are. Your vayu vayomer never. It doesn't say they come back and report. Elo vayelchu vayomer. They go and they report. So they report from where they're sent to. You understand? The lightning bolt doesn't go back to Hashem and says, I've done the job. The lightning bolt on the ground is reporting to Hashem because Hashem is everywhere. They have a Zoom. Yeah, something like that. So you see that the Shekhinah is in every place, and it's not only the west. Rabbi Birnbaum also holds the Shekhinah is everywhere. He says, how do you know the Shekhinah is in every place? The Pasuk says, the malach that was speaking to me was exiting, and another angel was coming towards him. So this is in a nevuah of Zechariah, where he talks about measuring Yerushalayim. There's a thing about whether Yerushalayim should have a measure, how large it will be. I think this is talking about a vision of the future, or has it got no boundaries? Is it prozos, open, right? Like Ori HaProzim in the Megillah, open, no boundaries to Yerushalayim. And one malach was speaking to Zechariah, and he was exiting and leaving. Another angel came towards him. So it doesn't say it came after the first malach. It came towards the malach. You understand? Like from a different direction. You see the Shekhinah is in every place. Again, we're not so concerned about the specifics of that nevuah. The fact is, one was telling Zechariah one thing, and the other malach was coming to tell him a different thing. But the point is the malach came from an opposite direction. Why? Because Hashem is everywhere. It doesn't need to send the malach from one place. Malach can come, right? What is a malach? Ask that question. It's not a thing with wings. What's a malach? Although there is a reference to wings, but you don't understand what I mean. Yes, there's 6 and 4. Yeah, that's right. And then what? Also in what's it called? In Nevuah and Yechezkel, it also talks about wings. So, but still, it's not what we conceptualize as we have a Christian image in our minds of a malach. Let's be clear, right? An angel. We think of angels, whatever image we've got in our minds, generally, because it's a spiritual emanation. Rabbi Tat has a whole thing about this. It's a spiritual emanation. It's not something you can put a how should I put it, like a picture to. Does that mean a picture to? A malach is Hashem is something Hashem sends to do His will. Yeah, exactly. Agent, that's malach, shliach, exactly to do His will. An agency of Hashem, right? Yeah, however you understand it, it's spiritual, I think. What? Spiritual. If something like exactly right. Yeah. Rav Sheshes also says the Shekhinah is in every place. Rav Sheshes said to Shamas, put me in any direction. Now Rav Sheshes was blind, so he didn't know which way he was facing when he davened. Didn't know which way he was facing. And he said to Shamas, you put me in any direction, lebar mi mizrach, except for the east. Love mishum the less Shekhinah. And not because the Shekhinah is not there, ela mishum d'moru bo mini, because the Talmidei Avodah Zarah, the minim, they say to pray in the east, and therefore he didn't want to be in the east. I don't think it doesn't seem to be. Yeah, I don't know whether he's facing east or.
It's in Eretz Yisrael.
So, okay. The first thing is look. The Tosfos says here that all of these Amoraim, and we'll see other opinions here as well, right? All these Amoraim don't hold of the Gemara in Brachas, which says Chaim Adam Nispalel Neged Yerushalayim. You got to face Yerushalayim, right? Because it says they learn. Gemara in Brachas says Vispalel Elecha Der Chartzam. You got to face Yerushalayim. That's how it is, right? They hold like Rabbi Shmuel that says that the Shekhinah is in every direction. Okay. And the one who says the Shekhinah is a Mar, holds Rabbi Kiva, says because it's Tadira, that's always where it is, as we saw, that the Shekhinah is always there. Okay. So this is we'll see how the Gemara develops it. There is an opinion on the next Amud, Rabbi Chanina, who talks about living in Bovel and davening facing the south. And that's like the Gemara in Brachos. So there is an opinion later on which will fit with what we do. This doesn't, right? We face east, not because we face east, we face Yerushalayim. That's the difference between Muslims and Jews, right? Muslims always face east, whereas Jews face Yerushalayim. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you've got to face Yerushalayim. So in Bovel, they face south because they're in the Tzofan in the north. That's where Bovel was, right? Anyway, so that's why it's a bit confusing, this, because we're not going with these Amoraim are not going with what we do, right? So Rosh Hashanah said to Shammos, put me in every place except from the east. I'm not sure. It seems to be facing east or standing in the east. I don't know. It must be facing the east. I think standing in the east. But why doesn't he want to be there? Why doesn't he want to be there? Just because because they say you should pray in the east. Now it's very interesting because who is he talking about? Which people? Who are the minim? You know, this is something I mentioned. This is a massive question across the whole of the Gemara. Who the minim are? Minim we translate as heretics. What does that mean? Because in some contexts it seems quite clear that the minim were early Christians, but only not some contexts, not all contexts. Who? Well, that's the question, because in some places in the Gemara there is very strong grounds to suggest that the reference to minim refers to early Christianity, because of the context there, such as when it talks about in the Gemara in Brachos about the whole V'lam al-Shinim, the Bracha V'lam al-Shinim. In fact, the early versions of V'lam al-Shinim, the earliest versions that you have of the Bracha V'lam al-Shinim from the Cairo Geniza, which around the 10th century, say V'lam Notzrim, although they also say Minim V'lam Notzrim. Notzrim is definitely Christianity, it's Christians, early Christians, right? Now, the thing is, there are other Gemaras that seem to imply Minim might be referring to the Stoichim, for example, who didn't believe in Torah Shabbat. So, it's just interesting to know. It's not clear who this refers to. You might be tempted to say that it refers to the Muslims, but it can't possibly refer to the Muslims because they weren't around. It predates Islam. Islam 7th century, so we are pre the Islamic period. Anyway, that's what the Gemara. That's what he says. That's what he says. Now, Rabbi Avo says. You see, the other thing is here, it could just be regular standard pagans, because the pagans would logically say to face east, right? Why? Because they pay about the sun, the rising sun, summer solstice, right? Stonehenge, etc., etc. That type of thing. So, I mean, that could just be the simplest explanation. No, I think they face. I think. Pardon? I think they do. I think that they used to face. I might be wrong. I remember reading. I remember where it was that historically, this is one of the ways in which they sought to create a distinction between themselves and Jews. So they would always face east. Technically, they should face Mecca wherever they are in the world. But I think that was an early distinction that was brought in to distinguish between Jews and Muslims. There's similar things you find in Christianity. It's fascinating topic, right? Fascinating topic. You know, the whole fixing of Easter. And the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century was because they had a problem, right? Why would they had to come up with a new method of fixing Easter that wasn't tied to Pesach. Otherwise, it was always like, we need the Jews. We need the Jewish calendar to work out what Easter was. So come along 4th century and they work out when Easter is because of a different thing. Anyway, we get sidetracked. I can tell you, I did this for my master's, but we don't have time to do it now.
I think they do face Mecca. I'm not sure they just face east, because unfortunately, I know from work they have a direction to.
Yeah, it could be. They face the Qibla, don't they? But I'm not sure what. Yeah, maybe it does. It vary, Richie? Is that right? They always vary.
I'm only ever in Baker Street. I wouldn't know in any other parts of the world.
Right. You're only ever at Baker Street. Okay, well, this is something we can do as homework. What? Luton Airport definitely says no. It says that thing in Luton Airport says it's got the little triangle. Yeah, but I don't know. I thought they always faced east. I might be wrong.
I think they currently only face Mecca.
They used to face Jerusalem, so they split with the Jews.
Oh, is that right?
Then they started to face Mecca to distinguish themselves from the Jews.
Oh, is that it?
They face Mecca.
So they do face Mecca, wherever they are, right?
There's
There's a compass on the prayer mat. Okay, so thank you, Travis. I stand corrected. So there's a compass on the prayer mat to be able.
You know where Mecca is, so you know where it is.
Okay, so they do the same as us. They just face Mecca, but originally they used to face Jerusalem. Okay. So they changed it. Okay, fascinating. Thank you. Okay, well that's the answer. Okay, so sorry for confusing everyone. What was that?
Muslims from the 9th century onwards dealt with the determination of the Qibla.
Qibla, that's Mecca. Yeah.
That's the direction.
Okay, that's it. Perfect. Okay, very good. From the 7th to the 9th, that was the change. Very good, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, right. Anyway, I think this probably means the pagans. Rabbi Birnbaum says the Shechina is in the west. Rabbi Birnbaum says my Uriah. What does it mean Uriah? Now, there's a question exactly what that means Uriah, but the word Uriah means here Avir Ko, the air of Ko, so it's because Hashem. So how do you know the Shechina is in the west? So Rashi brings two pshatim. Either means because that's the west, Avir Ko, so west, or that's just what they called Marav in Persian, Uriah. Or he says Mizrach, the east, is called Uriah, and it's Avir Ko because the Shechina is in the west, and therefore, so to speak, facing the east. So the east is the, so to speak, the airspace in front of the Shechina, so to speak, and that's how we know the Shechina is in the west. It's difficult to know how to understand this conceptually. Amar Rav Yehuda says, Amar Rav, what does it say in the Apostle? Yarif kamotor litli. My teachings should drip like rain. Zuruach marovis. This is the westerly wind, Shabomi Orpo Shel Olam, which comes from the Urif of the world, the strength of the world, or the back of the world. Either way, it means the west. The west is always referred to as Achar. The Apostle says, Achar of Kedem Sartoni. You formed me. Achar and Kedem, they're opposites. Kedem is the east, so Achar is the west, right? Tizal Katalim Rosi, just this pasuk in Devarim, we're just taking it to mean all the four directions. Tizal will flow like dew in Rosi, my teachings, Urach Tzophones, it's the northerly wind, Shemozeles, it's Azov, it brings heat and therefore famine, and therefore gold prices fall because no one wants gold. You see that there is cheapening written with regards to Zov, the gold, in this pasuk in Yeshaya. Kisirim ali desher, like Seirim, like storm winds on the desher, on the grasses or whatever, the herbage. Zuruach mizrachis. That's the easterly wind. Shemsaeres is kol olam kisoyer, stirs up the world like a soil. Soil is a reference to a shade, demon. So that's the west easterly wind. Revivim ali Yosef, like Revivim, like Revivim is also, I think, rains. Ali Asev on the grasses, Zurach Doromis, that is the southerly wind. Shimala Revivim Magdalas Southern. This creates rains and causes crops to grow. It's positive for the crops. Right. Okay. Before we sort out 6th century astronomy, we're going to do 7th century. We're going to do the Gemora. What was that, Rashi?
This is opposite to competition. Before we said northwest was the best way.
Yeah.
It would say southeast for the most.
It seems to be south is good and east is good. And what did we say before?
Northwest.
Well, we said north is positive. North is positive. We're still saying north is positive, no? Oh, were we not? We're not saying it's negative here, yeah. Right, Toshis deals with that problem. Ruach Mizrachis, the Mishnah implies it's better. The last Toshis on the almond. That the east is good. It comes normally. It's bad. That's what Rashi said on the Mishnah, actually. That's why Rashi said it on the Mishnah. See, that's the genius of Rashi. Rashi knew you were going to get to the end of the Gemara and you're going to have Martin Cantor's question. So what Rashi did was he put it in on the Mishnah. He said that it can be negative. You see, the Ruach Mizrachis can be negative, Rashi said. That Rashi on the Mishnah. If it comes for a bad thing, it can be negative. And that's what it says That's what they're going. That's what about. But generally speaking, it's good. Okay, we've got to do the Rashis from the Gemara. You don't have to distance 50 amas. You don't have to do a tool marking the Nama. The Rabbi Kiva Ashar Ruchos to Reisha Koi. When he talks about 50 amas, Rabbi Kiva is talking about he's going on the other directions of the that I mentioned earlier on. This was the two ways of understanding Rabbi Akiva. So the other directions, to dira beruchos, it's constant. We suggested that in the Gemara that the wind, this wind, is the most frequent of all winds. The wind of the the west, and is always the wind's always blowing. The westerly wind blows more frequently than other winds, and we said that can't be because the northerly wind does that. The northerly wind blows with all of them. Actually, no, sorry, we said the southerly wind is the worst in this one. But the northerly wind blows with all of them. It is soft and it's sweet and it's clear. As the Gemara says in Yavamas, matkos on it somehow sweetens the other winds. Ben Nates is a malach osi with the musnates. It's a malach formed in the image of an eagle. Ma'amida b'chnofov, he withholds this wind with its the southerly wind with its wings. Yeah. To dira b'shchina. So we said, okay, we're leaving that aside, and we said the issue with the southerly wind. Why can't the southerly direction? Why can't you put your tannery there or whatever? Because the shchina is there. Amarav Shechenes, it's in the west. And then we said that Rishon Levi said we have to thank our ancestors who told us where to daven. Lavusenu, who Lavusenu Anshe Knesset Gedola Shomer Mikros Lev Sefer Ezra. Said this pasuk in Sefer Ezra. The Tzva Shamayim Hashemesh V'Yareach Omdim Mizrach. The sun and the moon, which are in the east, L'chom Mishtachvim L'Marav. They bow down to the west. The Dilma Hein Mizrach Mishtachvim. The Gemara asked, maybe they bow down to the east, the sun and the moon. The Chitema Ein Derech Mishtachvim Somach L'Rab. You're not going to bow down next to the master. Hey, Moshe Ke'evish Not a Prosmi Rabbi, but like a servant taking a gift or some handout from its master. The Chozel Acherov going backwards. The Mishtachvim and bowing down when he goes backwards. Mishanot al-pras takes something, takes the present or whatever, it distances and bows as it bows as it backs away. Pras is a matzah like a gift. After the pasuk at Tzva Shemayim, it's praising the agency of the heavenly hosts. And it says, you are alone in this midah. This is this idea about the Shekhinah being everywhere. When they come to say we've done what you told us to do, they got to go back to the place where the person who sent them still is. Where the place where they're sent to, there the Shekhinah is found. They say we've done what you sent us to do. Rashi just gives us the context of this thing about the Malachim. In the Nevuah of Zechariah, it says, "Lomudis Yerushalayim," to measure Yerushalayim. Kama Arocha, how long it is, how wide it is. Another Malach came to star Shlichus Sharishin to contradict the Shlichus of the first one. Shechoza Boy Hamokim, Militin Bomido. Hashem was chozer, so to speak, from giving it a measure. And he said, "Prozos Teshev Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim should be open without no limits to it." They both came from the Shechina. Doesn't say the Malach was sent after the first one. Towards him, Zebo Mikan, Zebo Mikan. Each came in different directions, and that's okay because Hashem is everywhere. Rav Sheshes Me'orinayim, how Rav Sheshes was blind, and he said to his servant, "L'chol rucha sa'okman, ha'mideni l'spalel, put me to daven in any direction." Except for the east, Talmidei of the Avodah Zarah, the Talmidim of the Ovdei Avodah Zarah, Morim Horo'ah, the students of Avodah Zarah, they rule this Sparal b'Mizrach to pray in the east. Uriah, Nishmatikach Kern L'Marabosh in Parsi says in Persian, this is Uriah refers to the west. That's Rashi's first explanation. V'linira, he says that's what I heard, but I believe Shekach Kern L'Mizrach b'Loshen Lat. The east is called Uriah in a foreign tongue. Behind the Dukoma Avir Ko, the air in front of Hashem. Shashchina b'Marov, the Shechina is in the west. Upon of the Mizrach, and he so to speak faces the east. Nimsa Mizrach Aviro, the east is his air space.
It's interesting with Betel HaMaravi.
Yes, the west.
The west, where Shechina is placed.
Yeah, Shechina b'marav.
You face east.
Only because of where Yerushalayim is. Depends where you are.
Well-
No, you don't. Well, where do you face? Yeah, because you're facing there.
You face the French first of all nearby.
Yeah,
But
you're facing.
It
Yeah.
can't be by accident. The West.
No, absolutely, and this is the point. There's where you say if you say Shechina b'Marov, if you say the Shechina b'Marov, yeah, that's right. That's a Okay, well maybe we'll see because the Gemara talk comes back to Zoom. So the Gemara, Yaraf Montelichi, Moshe Rabbeinu Dimes HaTorah Abaruchos, Moshe compared to the Torah, it's 4 directions. Shem Sheyef Shebelo Hein. Just like it's impossible without them, it's impossible for the world without the Torah. Strength of the world. The Shekhinah is in the west. That's what he holds, and therefore he calls it the strength. And that's why the west would be called the strength. Oref is the back of the neck. So it's the back of the world. The west is always called the back. East your tent, and it isn't. And back again, opposite of east is achar. It's the west. Yes, the back of the neck. Yeah, you got to think of the directions as a person, a human being, if that makes sense, facing forwards. Because the way that there's right, if you're a human being facing forwards, so the east is your face, the back of your head is the west. Right. Yeah. South is right.
Yes.
And that's right. South is right. Yeah, that's right. And the left is north. We'll come. Yeah. The four directions. But that's where you get ponim and achar, and then it's also I can't remember the psukim. It could be the Gemara we'll bring though. Anyway, heats up and it brings this hot wind, and the famine comes, and therefore the gold goes down in value. It says cheapening regards to gold. Kiseir is a shade, is a demon. That's what a soyer is. Right. Okay. 3 minutes. There's okay on 5 minutes. Tanya says, Olam lach sadru dome. This is fascinating more. It appears twice in Shas, once in Bava Basra and once in Psachim. And the Tanoim, debated the pathway of the sun. In other words, what happens to the sun at night? Does it go underneath the world and back in around the other side, or does it go inside? What happens to it? Now, the obvious question is on this whole Gemara is the Earth goes around the sun. Yeah. So the simple answer to that, there are two ways, of two broad approaches. We'll come back to. I'm just going to introduce it now. We'll come back to Mitzvah next time. There are two broad approaches to understanding this Gemara. Either you understand this Gemara, I'm talking from a scientific sense. I understand this Gemara based on they were understanding it based on the science at the time, or it's not as contradictory as you think, because from the perspective of Earth, this is what it looks like. You're describing the movement of the sun from planet Earth. Okay, but this is a broader question about Chazal and science, a very fascinating topic. When you come up with pieces in the Gemara, how they are, how they work and whatever. But it does appear from the way the Gemara is phrased that it is going with the pre-Galilean understanding of exactly, which is not difficult because it's from then. That's what they were. That's the Earth being the center, everything, right? Which is not conceptually, it's not such a difficulty to understand that's what the Gemara is going, right? Anyway, the Gemara, the first opinion says, we'll come back to it. He says that the world is like an achsadra. An achsadra it's like a pavilion or something like that has 4 sides, but one side is open. There is no wall on the 4th side. You've got to think of the world like that. This doesn't just mean the world; it means the world and its atmosphere as well. The kind of what you see, right? Okay. V'ruach tzefonis einam suveves. There's no and the northerly direction is completely is not enclosed. The kiven shikir chametzel keren marov is tzefonis. Once the sun reaches the northwesterly corner, that means it's setting. Yes, it's setting in the west. In the summer, the northwest. Well, it gets to no, it doesn't get to the northwest. No, it gets to the south. Exactly right. That's right. That's right. Nechfefes va'ola lemala min rakia. It then bends and goes up above the rakia. Okay, and basically it kind of like slips out and goes above the sky, imagining that the sky is non-see-through, and that's why you don't see the sun at night, and therefore the world goes dark. Okay, and then comes back in the other direction, in the east.
Going up.
It's going above the. It's going above the north. It's going above this at night. At night, it's going. It's going above the. It's going above the. What's it called?
You see it going down rather than
Sunset.
Pardon?
you see it going
Yeah,
down
they're
rather
turning back on
than-
itself. I love a picture of it here.
Sunset is set, not up.
That's right. Blazer. Blazer. Pardon?
See, the sun appears to be going down. So it's
Something like
it's
this.
heading south.
Presumably what he's saying is that once it's dipped a bit up beneath the horizon, it's
It goes behind the
takes an
sky.
arc.
It takes an arc and goes back round.
So
That's right. That's right.
We can't see it because it's hidden by the rakia, but it does. That feels like that.
Is that saying the world?
Yeah, I've got a picture of it here. Great. I think there's a picture in the art scroll as well, isn't there? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Anyway, and Rabbi Shua is going to say basically the whole thing is enclosed in a box. It's like it's a complete box, and the Ruach Tzifonis has also got a wall of, there's a mechitza on all four sides. When the sun reaches the keren in the corner of the Ma'arovis Tzifonis, that northwesterly point, what happens then? Then makefes v'chozeres achorei kippah. It then kind of jumps around and goes behind the wherever the kippah is. That I think that means actually the earth. Or no, it might be the rakia, the firmament outside. Yeah. No. No, kippah's an arch, actually, I think. Yeah. Okay, so your homework for next week is to prepare this Gemora. Lots of time over Purim. Prepare this Gemora. See if we can understand it in terms of the two different opinions in Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua. The art scroll has very nice pictures of this. I don't know if they make it clear or not, but it's basically an understanding of how the sun revolves around the earth and what happens to the sun at night. That's the question. And we will, Mitzvah Hashem, continue next Monday. Pray for Purim.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Take care. Have a good evening.